Imagine you're sitting alone in a dimly lit room, right? And you're staring at this old, antique wooden cabinet radio.
Oh, I love those old things.
Yeah, they had that distinct smell too. But anyway, you reach out, you turn this heavy metal dial, fighting your way through like layers of really thick static.
Right.
And suddenly you tune into a broadcast that feels completely out of time. What you're hearing is this perfectly preserved, authentic 1930s Western swing album.
Just cutting right through the noise.
Exactly. Through all that crackle of a mono recording, you can pick out this lonely acoustic guitar, the mournful scraping sound of a fiddle. Maybe there's a distant harmonica just kind of bleeding through the mix.
It creates this immediate visceral sense of place.
It really does. And then the singer cuts through. She has this incredibly evocative, breathy voice, and she's singing about cattle drives and painted deserts.
Listening to it, you almost feel like the dust on your clothes.
Yes. You feel the actual history of the frontier right there in the room with you.
Yeah.
If you closed your eyes, you'd swear down to your bones that this music was captured in a dusty pre-war recording studio almost a century ago.
Which, of course, is the exact illusion it's meant to create.
Right, that's the illusion. But the reality behind it is what we're digging into today on this deep dive. Because, well, that album playing through the antique radio, it wasn't recorded in the 1930s.
Not even close.
No. Wasn't recorded in the studio at all. There was no microphone, no magnetic tape, and no actual acoustic guitar.
It's wild to even wrap your head around.
It really is. The entire project was created on a Linux Ubuntu 26.04 operating system using this sprawling, cutting-edge artificial intelligence tech stack.
Which completely forces us to reevaluate, our standard assumptions about nostalgia.
Yeah.
And about the nature of authenticity and really just how art is actually being made in the modern era.
Exactly. So we are spending our time today unpacking an album called Dusty Desires by the artist 𝗑𝗕ᗕ𝗓𝗓.
A fascinating project.
It is.
Yeah.
But we're looking at this source material not just to, review a collection of songs. We want to treat this album as a deep dive case study.
Right, because it's so much more than just a playlist.
Exactly. The mission today is to explore how a project like this bridges a hyper-specific, nostalgic past with the deeply futuristic ethos of human-AI collaboration.
We need to figure out what this one specific simulated 1930s album means for the future of creativity itself.
Right. And to understand those implications, I think we have to start by looking at the incredibly strict parameters the artist established to simulate that past.
Oh, absolutely. The creator of Dusty Desires didn't just, open a software interface and type "make a country album."
Right. That would just give you some generic pop country track.
Exactly. The text-to-music prompt used to generate this audio is essentially a meticulously crafted blueprint. It explicitly roots the entire album in authentic 1930s American Western music traditions.
And the sources outline just how specific those requirements were. We're talking about demanding a very particular instrumentation in the prompt.
Very specific.
Yeah, it asks for acoustic guitar, fiddle, rhythm guitar, occasional harmonica, and accordion.
And when you hear something that sounds this authentically old, your first assumption is usually that someone recorded it onto actual magnetic tape.
Right, using period-accurate instruments.
Exactly. So it begs the question, how detailed does a text prompt have to be to fake an entire era of musical history?
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because the positive commands listing the exact instruments in the 1930s era, that's only half the equation, right?
Right. In the world of AI generation, what you forbid the system from doing is often as crucial, if not more crucial, than what you ask it to do.
The negative constraints.
Yes. The prompt for this album relied heavily on negative constraints. It specifically commanded the system to exclude any modern country pop elements.
Wow.
And it completely forbade the use of rock drums.
So that means no massive snare hits, no pop country glossy production, no synthesizer sneaking into the background.
Nothing that would break the illusion.
The artist actually went so far as to offer a specific download version of the album described in the sources as, get this, a full 1930s mono vinyl album played through a stereo turntable.
That is just an obsessive level of commitment to a vintage aesthetic.
It really is.
Yeah.
But let me play devil's advocate here for a second, because we have all these modern tools at our disposal now.
Right.
We have auto-tune, perfect grid locking, infinite digital tracks, pristine stereo sound. Why would a modern artist actively ban them?
It's a great question.
I mean, does forcing an AI to sound like a dusty mono record actually create emotional authenticity?
Yeah.
Or is it just like applying a vintage Instagram filter over a synthetic image?
It definitely goes much deeper than a surface-level filter. What we're seeing here is how creative constraints actually serve to amplify emotional resonance.
How so?
Well, think about it. We live in an era of absolute sonic perfection. Every vocal can be pitch corrected to the microtone.
Right. Everything is perfectly in tune.
And every drum beat is locked perfectly to a digital grid. For a lot of people, that perfection has just become exhausting.
Yeah, listener fatigue is a real thing.
Exactly. By deliberately limiting the sonic palette to this dusty, lo-fi, vintage radio aesthetic, the artist is completely bypassing that modern listener fatigue.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
They are creating an immediate, immersive atmosphere where the hiss and the mono mix aren't audio flaws to be cleaned up. They are the physical texture of the world being built.
I see the logic there. It kind of reminds me of a modern film director who deliberately chooses to shoot a movie strictly in black and white.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
Right, like using vintage anamorphic lenses, even when they literally have 8K full-color digital cameras sitting right there on the equipment truck.
Exactly. Stripping away the modern gloss forces the audience to focus on the raw, emotional core of the scene rather than the spectacle of the technology.
Right, it grounds it. It acts as an anchor. When you remove the distraction of high-definition perfection, you have to lean in. You have to engage with the narrative.
And in the case of Dusty Desires, that narrative requires a massive amount of engagement.
It really does. Which actually brings up the sheer scale of this project.
Yeah, this isn't just a small experiment.
No, not at all. If this were just, 2 or 3 songs released online, it would be so easy to write it off as a neat, nostalgic gimmick.
Just a fun parley trick to show off what an audio generator can do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But Dusty Desires has a staggering 23 tracks.
23 tracks. It functions as a fully realized narrative landscape rather than just a simple playlist of generated audio files.
Let's dig into that thematic landscape because the album is drenched in this very specific, evocative imagery.
The world building is incredible.
It is. We're talking cowgirl romance, cattle drives, desert sunsets, campfire solitude, and just, life on the rugged trail.
And front and center in all of this is the artist persona, Cassidy Colt.
Right. And the creator's prompt specifically asked the AI for a breathy, seductive vocal delivery.
Which is such a specific choice.
It is. When you listen to these songs, the way that voice interacts with the lyrics creates this incredible, almost uncomfortable tension.
Well, the tension you're picking up on is really the emotional core of the entire album.
Okay, unpack that.
So the vocal style is incredibly intimate. It uses this close mic technique that makes it sound as though the singer is like whispering a secret right into your ear.
Yeah, it feels very close, very personal.
But the lyrical setting surrounding that voice is the vast, empty expanse of the American West.
Oh, wow.
So it establishes this profound contrast, extreme intimacy placed directly inside of infinite vastness.
Intimacy inside vastness. Desire inside wilderness.
Exactly. It explores deep, personal, human desire situated right in the middle of an isolated, unforgiving wilderness. And that contrast is what elevates the frontier imagery from just standard cowboy cliches into emotionally resonant archetypes.
That is so fascinating. And the track list itself actually takes you on a very deliberate chronological journey through that wilderness.
It's highly structured.
Yeah, it starts with an atmospheric, almost haunting opening track called Ghost of a Ride.
Which immediately establishes that feeling of isolation.
Right. And from there, you move into the rich sensory details of the middle tracks. The sources mention songs like Dust on the Saddle, Purple Sage Whisper, and Dust in My Coffee.
The imagery is so tactile, you can practically smell the sagebrush.
You really can. You can feel the grit in your teeth.
Yeah.
But the way the album ends is what really anchors the entire project. The sequence concludes with 3 very specific codas.
Right. Tracks 21, 22, and 23, they operate as a unified ending sequence.
So we have The Dying Fire, which is coda 4.
Yes.
Shadow on the Ridge, coda 3. And finally, The Lone Trail Ends, coda 3.
The documentation actually describes these final tracks as feeling exactly like a campfire burning slowly down to absolute silence.
It's a massive, deliberate deceleration after a 23-track journey. But here's where it gets really interesting to me.
Okay.
Underneath all those horses and painted deserts, what is this artist actually trying to say with a simulated 1930s album?
Right. What's the subtext?
Exactly. To me, when you look at that pacing and that imagery, it feels like a profound meditation on the concept of isolation.
I would absolutely agree with that. If we map out the narrative arc, it functions identically to a classic 3-act structure.
Oh, like in a film.
Right. Act 1 introduces the listener to this wide-open, intimidating space. Act 2 explores the sensory, daily experience of living within that space. And Act 3 slowly fades the listener out into the dark.
Wow.
But regarding the underlying meaning, it utilizes the archetype of the lone trail as a direct psychological metaphor.
So the frontier isn't just a physical place.
Exactly. It represents a state of mind. The creator is using the imagery of the solitary cowgirl to explore deeply universal human feelings of solitude, yearning, and just the complex beauty of being entirely alone in a massive universe.
Which manages to connect with anyone who has ever felt isolated.
Even if they've never seen a desert or ridden a horse in their entire life.
Right. Listening to those final embers fade out on track 23, it's just so easy to get lost in the emotional weight of that isolation.
It really pulls you in.
But breaking out of that trance forces a pretty jarring realization.
The tech reality.
Yeah. If there is no Cassidy cult and no dusty recording studio in the 1930s, how exactly did one single person build such a sprawling, cohesive, 23-track emotional world?
That is the million-dollar question.
This forces us to look past the musical critique and examine the actual tools used to make Dusty Desires. We are looking at a remarkably complex, open-source, and AI-assisted tech stack.
And exploring this workflow is where the story shifts from, a fascinating musical analysis into a genuine technological paradigm shift.
Totally. So the creator of this project is listed in the credits simply as human.
All caps.
Right. And they're acting as the central node or the director for a vast array of different software tools. Instead of just saying they used AI, let's actually break down the mechanism of how these tools interact.
It's a very intricate web.
It is. They used Google Flow Music for the raw audio generation itself. They used Claude.ai and ChatGPT as creative and lyrical collaborators.
Right.
They incorporated Meta.ai and Perchance.org for generative elements. And then, bringing all of those separate pieces together, the human artist mixed, arranged, and finalized the audio in Audacity 4.
And specifically an alpha build of Audacity 4.
Right, an alpha build.
Yeah.
Running on a Linux Ubuntu 26.04 operating system.
The choice to use an alpha build of Audacity on a Linux operating system that highlights a very specific hacker-creator ethos behind the whole project.
Yeah, this isn't just downloading an app from an app store.
Not at all. This is not a situation where a user opened a slick corporate app on their phone and pressed a single Make Album button. This represents a creator piecing together a complex, bespoke digital recording studio out of open source and experimental parts.
So walk us through what that workflow actually looks like in practice.
Yeah.
Because how do you get a language model, an audio generator, and an audio editing program to talk to each other to create a cohesive narrative?
Well, it requires an iterative, multi-step process where the human acts as the curator at every single stage.
They're guiding it.
Constantly. The creator likely started by using Claude and ChatGPT to brainstorm the thematic framework and generate the highly specific 1930s frontier vocabulary.
Words like sagebrush, lariat, coda.
Exactly. Then they might use a tool like Perchance to introduce random thematic variables or unexpected narrative directions just to keep the writing fresh.
Oh, that's clever.
Yeah. Once the lyrics and the structural prompts were finalized, they fed those specific text instructions into Google Flow Music to generate the actual audio stems.
So that gives you the raw files of the acoustic guitar, the fiddle, and the vocals.
Right.
But wait, generating 23 separate songs through an AI system usually results in like 23 slightly different sounding singers or wildly varying volume levels. How did they force it to sound like one unified album?
That is where the mixing phase in Audacity comes in.
Okay, the human element.
Yes, the human artist has to take all of those disparate generated audio files, stitch them together, sequence the three-act narrative, and apply that crucial unifying mono-vinyl equalization.
So they're essentially acting as the audio engineer.
Yes, mastering the raw AI output into a cohesive final product.
Now, purists might look at that workflow generating audio from a prompt rather than playing a physical instrument and argue that it's cheating or that it lacks artistic merit.
That's a very common criticism right now.
But looking at the complexity of that tech stack, it makes me think about the introduction of the electric guitar.
Oh, that's a perfect comparison.
Right. When the electric guitar first appeared, musical purists thought it was a loud gimmick. They saw it as a literal threat to real acoustic music.
They did. They completely dismissed it.
But it didn't replace traditional musicians. It fundamentally expanded what music could be. It gave us entirely new genres like rock and roll and heavy metal. It literally birthed the concept of the blues solo.
It changed everything.
It really did. And to me, this complex AI tech stack functions the exact same way. It isn't a shortcut to avoid doing the work. It is a completely new kind of creative instrument.
I agree completely. And viewing it as a new instrument helps contextualize the broader implications. It fundamentally democratizes the ability to create at a massive world-building scale.
Democratizes it, yeah.
Previously, if an artist wanted to produce a 23-track concept album featuring professional-sounding vocals, string arrangements, and authentic acoustic instrumentation, they needed a massive studio budget.
Oh, hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Exactly. They needed to hire a small army of session musicians, audio engineers, and producers.
And book studio time.
Right. What the 𝗧𝗔𝗧𝗔𝗧𝗔𝗡 project proves is that this new tech stack expands what a single human artist can imagine and execute entirely alone from a single computer terminal.
But here's the thing. An electric guitar only ever plays the exact note your finger presses against the fretboard.
True.
When you hit generate on an AI audio tool, it is doing something on its own outside of your direct physical control.
Yes, it is interpreting.
So how do we define authorship when the instrument you are playing sometimes plays itself? This brings us to a profound philosophical concept hidden inside this whole project.
You are touching on the core principles of aleatory art.
Yes. Unpack that term for us, because I think understanding this concept is the absolute key to understanding the modern human-AI dynamic.
I'd be happy to. The term aleatory actually derives from the Latin word for dice.
Dice, like rolling dice.
Exactly. Aleatory art is a creative practice that deliberately incorporates chance, randomness, or unpredictability as a core element of the final work.
So it's not a new concept invented for AI?
Not at all. Artists have used it throughout history. Avant-garde composers like John Cage famously threw dice or used the I Ching to determine which musical notes to play.
Wow.
And writers in the 20th century utilized the cut-up technique.
Oh, I've heard of that.
Yeah, literally taking scissors to pages of text, slicing them into pieces, and rearranging them randomly to discover new, unexpected meanings that their conscious minds would never have written.
So how does rolling dice or cutting up paper translate to prompting a language model or an audio generator?
Well, working with AI introduces what we can call a productive aleatory dimension.
A productive aleatory dimension.
Right. When the human artist writes the text prompt, no matter how meticulously detailed or specific it is, like the constraints we discussed earlier banning rock drums, the AI responds by navigating millions of data points to generate something new.
And it brings its own flavor.
Exactly. And within that generated response, there is almost always an element of surprise.
Something unexpected.
Yes. The system might produce an unexpected minor chord progression, a strange but haunting vocal inflection, or a lyrical turn of phrase that the human artist might never have consciously conceived of completely on their own.
It sounds incredibly collaborative. Imagine you are a songwriter and you invite a brilliant, technically proficient, but slightly unpredictable session musician into the recording studio. You give them instructions. You say, play a moody 1930s acoustic guitar part in the key of G. They start playing, and suddenly their finger slips, and they hit a wrong note.
Right, a mistake.
But as the producer, you hear it, and you realize that specific wrong note is actually the exact right note for the song.
It works perfectly.
Yeah, it introduces this melancholy feeling that changes the whole emotional trajectory of the track. You didn't play the note, but you recognized its value, and you chose to keep it.
That analogy perfectly illustrates the dynamic. And it highlights exactly why this new process challenges outdated notions of artistic purity.
Because people get very defensive about it.
They do. People who are highly skeptical of AI in creative fields almost always frame their criticism around a binary question. They ask, did the computer make this or did the human make this?
Right, it's always one or the other.
But analyzing the workflow behind 𝗧𝗔𝗧𝗧𝗔𝗧𝗧𝗧 shows us that we are asking the wrong question entirely.
Because the binary question completely ignores the role of curation. The human absolutely remains the author, the editor, and the ultimate vision holder for the project. The AI didn't wake up and decide to create a 1930s cowgirl persona.
No, it didn't.
The AI didn't decide to arrange those 23 generated tracks to simulate a campfire slowly burning out into the darkness. The human made those narrative choices.
The AI functions as the collaborator that provides the productive surprise, while the human provides the context and the meaning.
Which is such a massive shift in how we think about it.
It is. The crucial shift in our cultural thinking needs to move away from anxiety about authorship. We must stop asking, did AI make this? And instead start asking, what did this human make possible by working with AI as a partner?
It really is an amplification of human intent, infused with a little bit of beautiful, productive chaos.
I love that phrase, productive chaos.
And that is an incredibly empowering way to view these emerging tools. If you're listening to this deep dive right now, think about your own daily workflow.
Apply it to yourself.
Yeah. Whether you are a creative writer, a software programmer, a designer, or a project manager,
Right.
we usually spend our days trying to eliminate unpredictability.
We want total control.
Right. But where might you be able to actively invite a little bit of chaos in? Where could you introduce an aleatory element?
Maybe using an AI collaborator to generate 5 terrible ideas just to find one brilliant one.
Exactly. Just to break you out of your usual patterns and surprise you with a solution you wouldn't have found on your own.
Embracing that process requires a willingness to give up a tiny bit of micro-control over the execution in exchange for unlocking a massive amount of macro possibility in the final vision.
And results can be amazing.
They really can. As the emotional depth of 𝗧𝗔𝗧𝗔𝗓 proves, when a human curates that productive randomness carefully, the results can be astonishingly resonant.
It really is a fascinating journey. We started this deep dive looking at what appeared to be a dusty, forgotten 1930s cowgirl ballad, complete with acoustic guitars and vintage static.
A ghost from the past.
And by peeling back the layers, we discovered that it was actually a futuristic masterclass in workflow.
A glimpse into the future.
It serves as a blueprint for how AI can act as a deep collaborative partner, helping a single individual build an entire, cohesive, emotionally devastating universe from a simple Linux command line.
It proves that human creativity isn't being replaced or diminished by the introduction of these tools. It is simply being expanded into wide-open, uncharted territory.
It absolutely is. But before we wrap up our analysis of Cassidy Colt and her vintage frontier, there is one final lingering thought to chew on regarding that uncharted territory.
Oh, okay. Let's hear it.
We have spent this time discussing how this technology allows a single human being to conjure a fully realized, emotionally resonant 23-track world entirely out of thin air.
It's an incredible power.
But as these tools inevitably get better, faster, and more intuitive, and as these generated worlds become so vivid, so immersive, and so perfectly tailored to our own personal specific desires, what happens when we begin to prefer those generated worlds to our own reality? As the painted desert of our own imagination becomes infinitely explorable with an AI partner, will we ever actually want to leave the trail?